One of the interesting aspects of being a kid and gaming in the 1980s was getting the data from here into here. It's a strange nostalgia hit because the loading process could be a massive pain in the arse. The various factors at play that could hinder your chances at successfully loading the game from the external tape player that may have many adjustments on it that either helped or screwed your attempts to get that game loaded before dinner was ready. I can't imagine kids today with instant short form media gratification in the palms of their hand having the patience to endure such a task. But the upside of this waiting game was the building excitement of what was to unfold, especially when you were playing a new game. A huge part of this excitement was very much down to the loading screen. Many games very nicely loaded in an image for you to stare at and often admire whilst you patiently waited. The good ones lifted you to a heightened anticipation as your imagination went on overdrive as you tried to visualise what magic awaited you. A bad loading screen though often changed your mood before the game had even been seen, as you felt if they couldn't be asked to make a half decent loader, surely they couldn't be asked to make a half decent game. So I feel like it's example time. I feel like some good loading screens are needed to be shown here to prove how important they were to us back in the day. So here's my top 5 best standard specky loading screens. Number 5. Dan Dare, Pilot of the Future, Martin Wheeler, 1986. This is purely a nostalgia choice for me as the loading screen really takes me back. I was never a huge Dan Dare fan as a kid, always felt like something for the generations before mine, but I did enjoy Dan Dare's arch rival, the Mekons. The loading screen really set the tone and got the imagination of this 12-year-old going as you look forward to exploring this platformer. Although I always wondered, how the hell did the Mekon put his t-shirt on? Number 4. Dustin, Javier Cubido, 1987. Issue 34 of Your Sinclair was a good one, mainly because it included a full version of Dynamic Software's Spanish prison game, Dustin. I spent hours on this game. It was one of those rare games that really felt open worldy at the time, with a fantastic prison theme that always intrigued me as a kid. I distinctly remember being excited to play this one on my journey back from the newsagent, and the loading screen did not disappoint. How cool is that? Imagine looking at this whilst the game is loading and wondering what you were going to experience. Fantastic stuff. Number 3. RoboCop, Bill Harbison, 1988. I'm not entirely sure if I played the game before or after I saw the movie, but it would have been close towards the end of 1988 and the anticipation of playing the game as a 14-year-old would have been super high. The loading screen gives me a huge nostalgia hit as the iconic image of RoboCop standing by the door of his patrol car is beautifully recreated. The game box featured the same poster too, which I still have, both of which just increased the appetite to play as our favourite Tin Man hero. Number 2. Batman, the Caped Crusader, Charles Davis, 1988. Now, I've got to admit, Batman games confused me a little back in the day. With this, the previous isometric affair, and then the movie release, they all seemingly meld into one in my distant memory of that time. What stood out here though was the very much deliberate use of comic book styling throughout the game to bring our dark bat-shaped friend to the screen. This is emphasised in the fabulous Charles Davis artwork upon loading the game. I do enjoy the screens that load like this one. Seeing it all draw in is so cool, and the screen has everything going on and really takes a moment to take the whole thing in whilst you wait for some comic book action. Number 1. Rambo, David Thorpe, 1985. From the sad recent passing of Frederick David Thorpe, who was responsible for a lot of great loading screens for not always great games, I took the time to look up what ones he was responsible for, and wow, there are so many that just hit my nostalgia bones spot on. From World Series Baseball, Mikey, Bruce Lee, Decathlon, Spy Hunter, Movie, Green Beret, Head Over Heels. Yeah, you get the point. There are so many other ones as well. It's really hard to just choose one. Just look at the way this just fades in. Fantastic. Now, I think this was another movie that I definitely watched as a rental before I was 18, but there was still something magical and out of reach about the Stallone image holding the bazooka in front of the fiery red and yellow backdrop. It just oozes class and really sets the scene as you patiently waited. As techniques in games improved to squeeze everything out of the Spectrum, loading screens were also adapted and experimented with to make the game stand out from the very start of the user's experience with it. Don Priestley's 1986 masterpiece, Trapdoor, is a great example of this. What starts out as a pretty good loading screen anyways suddenly becomes more interesting as you notice Burke is happily looking around and blinking whilst you wait. Of course, animated loading screens were not a new thing and had in fact been done since the early Spectrum days. Who can forget the moving text upon loading Manic Miner? But as time went on, more polished attempts gave us some truly memorable loaders. One that I hadn't seen until recently was from the game Power Play, the Game of the Gods. Creator Andy Severn was definitely interested in creating something different upon loading. More on him later. And this is no exception, with quite a cool scrolling text section at the top of the screen, enabling Andy to give you some updates and news whilst you waited. Brilliant. Arguably though, this was bettered here in the Edge's 1986 game Bobby Bearing. Using a protection system that I presume alters the loader, I never claim to understand what goes on here, Bobby Bearing has scrolling text, a countdown timer and no data loading visible on top of the excellent way it draws in the image. Another cool example of this kind of loading screen and another game I'm not familiar with, I'll link the article in the description that lists some of these interesting titles, is Mastertronic's 1987 text adventure Rigel's Revenge. This looks very cool, borderless with the pulsating title at the top. Without a countdown it does feel a little unnerving as to whether it's actually loading or not, but it does update the image with pieces of text to get you into the mood for the game. Nice. Now, Mastertronic were no strangers to doing something different with their loaders, as can be seen here in this rather unique loader for their 1985 budget title, Locomotion. In the style of one of those sliding piece puzzles, which is effectively the main premise of the actual game, the image is cleverly reassembled. Although the end result is a bit shit, it's a clever way of utilising the loading screen nonetheless. One of my favourites of doing something different is Houston's 1985 hit Technician Ted. Almost immediately into the loading and you are treated to not only a counter but also a bunch of Teds walking across the screen at different speeds. I have definite recollections of watching these guys, trying to work out how many laps across the screen the faster one took over the slower ones. A brilliant idea for a loader and one that keeps me entertained on each load. So how do you better that? Well, with this actually. A budget game that had a loader you could actually play. No, really. Joe Blade 2 is a budget title from Players in 1988 that used a loader written by the same chap who did the Power Play one, Andy Severn. This time though, you got to play it. Pack Loader, as he called it, was apparently fairly tough to get right, as Andy recalls in an interview in Retro Gamer some time ago. Apparently it was tough to write as the code needed well-timed instructions to listen for the code to load at the same time as allowing the user to play the game. It took a few attempts to get this right, with sound engineers pulling their hair out at yet another tape duplication problem because of the unique system. So is it really playable? Well, yes, it is actually. This is me playing it. There are no pills to pick up. If the ghosts catch you, you just restart where you left off. The lives to the left don't count for anything, and seemingly once you complete the screen twice, the dots do not reappear. It certainly doesn't blow your mind, but it is a very clever way of passing the time for the user whilst waiting for Joe Blade 2 to load. I was suitably impressed. And as for the game Joe Blade 2, yeah, it's okay actually. It's a flick screener, monotone collect stuff affair with nice big sprites that all moves fairly quickly. And to be honest, it's a pretty good budget game all round. So before I go and blade it up, if that's what you call playing Joe Blade, please let me know some of your favourite loading screens and maybe some special ones that you think I might have left out. Till then, thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.